Shalom, everyone. This is part two in a series on metempsychosis in the Bible. So, if you haven't watched the first part, then I would direct you now to go and watch the first part, where I put the correct and proper understanding and context of this very esoteric doctrine of metempsychosis. Now, with that said, it's very important that you go and watch the first part of the video because, unfortunately, in this last generation, there are many stupid, ignorant, and foolish Christians, and even what I would call pseudo scholars and theologians, who, after studying ancient Greek philosophy vis-a-vis Plato and Pythagoras, and then proceeding to study the ancient Jewish Kabbalah, they begin to notice many similarities between the two and equations, etc. And then they proceed to erroneously and fallaciously make the assumption that it is the ancient Jewish Kabbalah, which is an image or offshoot of ancient Greek philosophy. And this couldn't be furthest from the truth. And again, this is why these individuals are ignorant, and if they are scholars or theologians, fake ones at that. So, nevertheless, in my first video, I give the correct understanding of this very esoteric doctrine, which is metempsychosis. So, in this second video, I begin by addressing principally all of the stupid and ignorant and foolish Christians who are either ignorant of this ancient esoteric doctrine or are foolish enough to relegate it as a pagan, or ungodly doctrine, or unscriptural doctrine for that matter, which goes back to their ignorance. So this is why we are beginning the second part in addressing the Christians, because the vast majority of Christians are the most ignorant and stupidest bunch among the children of Elohim, sadly enough, because they don't have that strong ancient Hebrew foundation that is most necessary. Now, we begin in Sefer Matityahu, chapter 16, verse 13 to 14, where it states, "When Yeshua came into the coasts, he asked his disciples, saying, 'Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?' And they said, 'Some say Yochanan the Baptist, some Eliyahu, and others Yirmiyahu, or one of the prophets.'" Now, again, if you had watched my first part, then of my first part of the series, you would understand, or you should understand by now, that metempsychosis was a very prevalent doctrine in antiquity. Even though it was esoteric in certain respects, it was still a very prevalent doctrine amongst the elite of, many societies. Whether it was the Brahmins or the Hindus or the Jews or the Egyptians, they all had this doctrine of reincarnation. And even though it's a very comprehensive and esoteric doctrine, many of its most fundamental aspects were widely believed in. And this is most especially true among Israel and the Israelites. And so, in its proper historical context, it must be understood here that during the Second Temple period, without question, the vast majority of Israelites were familiar with this doctrine of reincarnation. They held it as a veracious doctrine. And so many, knowing this veracious doctrine and the basics of it, many would have had the understanding that, many holy men reincarnate many times in this aeon. And so it would be very basic to them and to their ancient Hebrew culture and understanding that, this great holy prophet, Yeshua, who happens to be the son of Elohim, would be the reincarnation of some other holy saint before him. And so this is what this verse is indicating and intimating to the Hebrew reader who would be reading this. Because these synodic gospels were principally for the Hebrew Israelites in Israel or the lost in tribes, whose culture, of course, is Hebrew. and any initiates that were from the Goyim, whether they be Egyptians or Syrians or Babylonians, etc., as the gospel spread, outside of Israel. So this is the correct and proper context of this verse, and to any lay Hebrew, it would be readily understood. Now we proceed to this dynamic going on between Eliyahu and Yeshua. Now we read in Sefer Malachi, in chapter 4, verse 5, in the Septuagint, it states, "Behold, I will send you Eliyahu the Teshbith before the coming of the great and dreadful day of Adonai." Now, this is a very, very interesting verse because we must say might not be so, the rendering we have from the Masorah might not be accurate, right? Because here in the Septuagint, right, our ancient Hebrew sages, the most elite and esteemed ancient Hebrew Jewish sages of antiquity, during the Second Temple period, this is how they translated the verse from the original Hebrew. Duly note, they have here Eliyahu the Teshbith. It doesn't just state Eliyahu, unqualified. Eliyahu here is qualified. And it's a very, very, very specific qualification, meaning that he is the Teshbith. And Eliyahu the Teshbith, there's no question of who Eliyahu the Teshbith is. He was one of the most preeminent prophets and saints of Israel. So when the verse is telling us that Eliyahu is going to come again, it's not in reference to some other Hebrew man named Eliyahu, who can be anybody. It's a very, very specific man here who's going to be returning. And the recondite allusion here is, of course, to metempsychosis, or transmigration of souls, as we will now see in the subsequent verses that I cite here, which leads us now to the next verse, which is in Sefer Yochanan, chapter 1, verse 21, where it states, "And they, the Farashim, asked him," that is, they asked Yochanan, "What then? Art thou Eliyahu?" And he said, "I'm not." And they asked, "Art thou that prophet?" And he answered, "No." Now again, let's put this verse into context here. The Farashim are asking Yochanan, "Are you Eliyahu?" What are they asking? What is their understanding? Contextually, it should already be understood by now, they are initiated into this ancient esoteric doctrine of metempsychosis. They know it very well. And so when they're asking this question to Yochanan, who also is initiated into this ancient esoteric veracious doctrine, the basic understanding between both of them and their question is that it is a strict reference to transmigration of souls. So basically what they're asking him is, are you the reincarnation of Eliyahu, as we are expecting from our ancient divine oracles, which I just referenced in Sefer Malachi? He says, "No, I'm not." Then they ask him, "Are you that prophet that Moshe speaks of?" Which by now we should know is Yeshua. And he's not Yeshua, so he says, "No." Now, this is very interesting because Yeshua tells his disciples in Matthew chapter 11, verse 14, he says, "If you will receive it," in reference to Yochanan, he says, "This is Eliyahu, which was to come. He that had ears to hear, let him hear." This is very, very interesting because when the Farushim confronted Yochanan on this matter, he said, "I'm not Eliyahu." So we have a contradiction here that needs to be reconciled. Now, to any initiated saint, they know that there are no such thing as contradictions in the Bible, that all contradictions or apparent contradictions in the Bible are nothing more than illusions. They are illusions to the uninitiated and to the profane. who do not have the proper wise understanding of the scriptures and are not initiated. So to the uninitiated, this would be a contradiction in the Bible. To the initiated, they already have the keys to the reconciliation. They understand that it is only illusory. What then is the reconciliation, ye uninitiated may ask? Well, what does Yeshua say in Sefer Yochanan chapter 1 verse 30? He states, after me, my mistake. What does Yochanan say in reference to Yeshua in Sefer Yochanan chapter 1 verse 30? Yochanan states, after me cometh a man which is preferred before me, for he was before me. Well, this is interesting. Yochanan is saying there is a man right now in this present generation that is so much greater than me. And he's, of course, alluding to Yeshua HaMashiach. So, of these two verses just cited that appear to contradict themselves, who are we going to trust? Who are we going to believe? Are we going to believe Yochanan, who tells the Pharoshim that he is not Eliyahu, that he is not the reincarnation of Eliyahu? Or are we going to believe Yeshua HaMashiach, who's greater than Yochanan, who says that indeed, amen, amen, that is verily, verily, Yochanan is the reincarnation of Eliyahu? Well, for me, it's a simple question and answer. I'm going to take Yeshua's word or Yochanan's word because Yeshua is greater than Yochanan. This is simple logic. So, what then is going on? Why does, knowing that it is Yeshua who is speaking the truth on the matter, why then does Yochanan tell the Pharoshim that he is not the reincarnation of Eliyahu, if indeed he is? Is he purposely lying to the Pharoshim because he knows that they come with a wrong heart? Would that even justify lying to them? Or, in context, could it be in reference to one of the principles of metempsychosis, namely that the reincarnated individual isn't always aware or isn't always knowledgeable as to who he was in a previous lifetime? That is, a basic principle of metempsychosis is that individuals aren't always aware of who they were in a previous lifetime and who their and don't always have the knowledge of their previous lives. I mean, this is just a basic fact. If you come and ask somebody, tell me about your previous lives or tell me about your previous reincarnations, 99.9% of the time, most people are either going to look at you like you're crazy, and they're most certainly not going to be able to answer your question truthfully. So could it be that Eliyahu just wasn't aware? I mean, could it be that Yochanan just wasn't aware that he was the reincarnation of Eliyahu? Well, of course, absolutely. That is the reconciliation. Yeshua being you know, the son of being the son of Elohim and being Mashiach, you know, he's you know, Elohim in the flesh, so to speak, and so he's going to be on a very omniscient. He's going to be on a very omniscient level, having almost all knowledge and wisdom in his possession. Whereas Yochanan, who is a much lesser being and lesser soul than, say, Elohim or Mashiach, isn't going to have all the knowledge and wisdom that Mashiach has. I mean, most saints are not given that knowledge. When you incarnate here, you know, in this world, you come into this world with a huge memory wipe. When you are first born, your memory, you have a huge memory wipe to your pre-existence. And a subset of that pre-existence is indubitably your previous lives and incarnations. And Yochanan was no exception than most other saints who are given memory wipes. We're all given memory wipes when we come into this earth. There are only a few exceptions, and one of those exceptions was, of course, Yeshua. And we would think that Yochanan would not be such an exception, but for whatever reason, he just wasn't granted that exception, at least not at that point in his life when the Farushim came to him and asked him whether he was Eliyahu. Finally, we proceed to our final proof for this video, which is, it states in Sefer Yochanan, chapter 9, verse 1-3. It states, "And as Yeshua passed by, he saw a man which was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Yeshua answered, Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of Elohim should be made manifest in him." Right? Let's analyze this verse and break it down. Here we have this man who's blind, and the disciples are asking Rabbi, they're saying, Rabbi, why is this man blind? Did he commit a sin in a previous lifetime? Is it because his parents sinned? You have to understand that his disciples at this point are very initiated into the holy mysteries. Okay? Their level of initiation is at such a high level that most Christians can't fully comprehend the level of initiation that they are at, let alone Yeshua's level of initiation. Okay? And unfortunately, to go into the full details of all of the laws and principles, in regards to pre-existence and metempsychosis are far beyond the ken of this video. And this video is by no means meant to be an exhaustive teaching on these matters. However, as an introduction, it should be stated that they understood the doctrine of reincarnation, and they understood that as one of those principles of reincarnation, that it is that, your current life is a function of your previous lives. So from this verse, we are able to learn one of the first laws or principles of metempsychosis, which is that your current life is a function of your previous lives. Assuming, of course, that your current life is not your first life or incarnation. And so, on one level, this is what they're asking in reference to. They're saying, in what sin did he commit in a previous life? Or was he a very sinful man in a previous life that has warranted now for him to be blind? Or is it that his parents sinned, and now, as it is written in the Torah, that the sins of our forefathers visits us to the third and fourth generation, which, by the way, is another esoteric reference to metempsychosis, which will be covered in a future video. They're basically asking, so did his parents sin in such a great way that he warranted to be born this way, right? Now, again, let's properly break down and analyze this verse. After they ask this question, do we note that Yeshua's response is not, "Oh, you foolish disciples, how dare you ask such a question? Your question is silly. You're asking a very foolish question." His response is not, "Silly babies, don't you know that reincarnation is a doctrine of the pagans?" He doesn't say that. He doesn't admonish them for their questions. He doesn't admonish them by telling them, your question is ungrounded, your question is based on false assumptions, your question is based on false doctrines, your question is based on a false understanding, your question is based on false principles or false doctrines. No, that's not his response. He has no problem with their question. He fully understands their question, and he fully understands that their question is a valid question. He and his disciples are all highly initiated Kabbalists. They understand fully what's going on here. They just need to know what's the answer. Is his current condition in reference to previous lives or to his parents? Which is it? These are all valid sources for his condition. And nowhere does Yeshua raise those sources as a problem. Rather, his answer is no, it's not based on his previous lives. No, it's not because his parents sinned. Although it validly could be the case, for his case, this is not the case. Even though, yes, there are some people who have certain conditions based on previous lives, even though there might be other people who have this condition based on their sin of their parents, for this particular man, this is not the case with him. He's a very special exception. The reason he has this condition, that is that he is blind, is so that the works of Elohim should be made that manifest in him. Again, on an esoteric level, this is what this verse is intimating. It is making subtle allusions to these other Kabbalistic laws. Laws that deal with metempsychosis and transmigration of souls, laws that deal with the sins of generations, etc. These are all other principles and laws that are spoken of in the Torah and HaQabbalah. And they're not a problem. Now, I will conclude by stating that there are other proofs in the New Testament for metempsychosis. Unfortunately, some of these proofs in other books in the New Testament are extremely, extremely advanced Kabbalistic references to metempsychosis. And this video was meant to be more of an introduction than a very advanced Kabbalistic disquisition. And so this is why I have not included the other more advanced, extremely Kabbalistic proofs, some of them rather explicit, for metempsychosis in the New Testament. Most of which are found in the most Kabbalistic and Jewish book of the entire New Testament, which is the book of the Apocalypse or Revelation. Nevertheless, this video will shut the mouths of these Christian babies. Amen.